Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 144 of the Debt Free Dad podcast. Now, one of the number one goals I often hear, especially for people who are wanting to get out of debt or clean up their debt, is I want to buy my first home. Or, Brad, I really want to move. I want to buy my more ideal home. How do I know when I'm ready to do that? Or how do I budget for a home purchase? Or what does it look like to be financially ready to buy a home? We are going to talk all about this topic on today's show. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast, where we're helping normal, everyday people learn how to save money and kick debt so they can live a happier and stress-free life. Now here's your host, Debt Free Dad, Brad Nelson.
What is going on, everyone? You can find me on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search Brad Nelson, Debt Free Dad. And as always, guys, welcome to today's show. Remember to get all the resources, show notes, and links from today's show. You can head over to balancencents.com/144. That's BALANCEDCENTS.com/144. So kind of a big topic today, guys. Talking about home buying. You know, how do I budget for a home? Am I ready to buy a home? And today we just want to talk a little bit about some keys for home buying and budgeting success. And again, this isn't meant to be like an all-inclusive master list, right? But we are going to kind of just hit on kind of the bigger things and things that surprised me. I've owned 3 homes. One I lost to foreclosure and luckily was able to sell in a short sale, which was good. But I understand what it feels like to get into a house that feels great, and then also to get into a house that you can't afford and your house broke, right? We definitely don't want that. But sometimes the emotion and this push to be a homeowner can make you do some silly things and get yourself into some tough spots when it comes to a home and a home purchase. So today we would just want to kind of talk about and just cover some of the basics, and hopefully, if you're looking at buying a home or you're looking at maybe selling your home and getting into a bigger home or moving, maybe some of this information will help you out. So, guys, just off the top of the bat, was there anything, and I know we're going to talk about a few different things, but if you guys had to go through the home buying process again, what were some things that maybe surprised you guys the most about it? Was it money? Was it stress? What shocked you about it? Was like anything pop up that you just didn't expect?
The stress. I said I would never do it again.
So you're staying in your house for the rest of your life?
Well, now that I'm here, I probably won't, but now that the stress is gone. But no, that was our first home purchase. It was a lot of unknowns. It was just very stressful. Even though we were so prepared, or I felt like we were so prepared, I was still incredibly stressed, and I did not enjoy the whole process at all.
Yeah. There was actually, and Ryan, you might be able to talk about this too, because I know your wife did real estate for a while. But when I was in real estate for a very short period of time, maybe 7-8 months tops. Got my license, and I just worked kind of side by side with this other real estate agent just to kind of see if I would like it. This was back in my early 20s. And I remember one of the statistics that I read when I was going through and trying to learn how to become a real estate was that buying and being a part of a real estate transaction for most people is the same stress level as finding out that you have cancer. I was
what?
Yeah. I was shocked,
yeah, okay,
right?
I could I guess. I don't know. I've never had cancer, so.
Right, especially if you're one that, if you're selling and buying at the same time, and then one transaction doesn't go through, and it's like a domino effect, right, to a bunch of others. I could totally see that. But, Ryan, anything that you want to hit on that surprised you about home buying at all?
Yeah, we're going to touch on it here, but the one thing I think that we just weren't, I don't want to say smart's not the right word, but we just weren't educated on it. And that is when it came to what we could afford as a house, right? Pretty much everything we've seen and you can go online right now. There's tons of calculators you can find on all the banking websites. There's a lot of horrible advice going around on TikTok from mortgage brokers. All these people that are basically telling you how much you can afford.
Right.
And none of them can tell you that. Like, you have to figure that out.
Yep.
And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that got us into trouble the most, is because, they use the numbers and like, based on the mortgage principles from such and such and such. They're not wrong. They're not lying to you, but it's just what the mathematical equation says that you could afford based on the income you tell them you have.
Right.
It doesn't take anything else into effect, any of your goals, anything else. And we just were ignorant about that. It was like, well, it says we can afford this, and we're going to get a house a little less than that, so we're fine.
Yep.
And we were house poor because, we had a big, huge house and a big, huge payment. And we just, I'm not mad at anybody. It's our own fault, but we kind of trusted the people in the banks that they knew what to do for us. And they're not bad people. It's just not their job to financially educate you. It's their job to sell you a mortgage.
Right. Wait. So you trusted the financial industry? Come on. Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
We all do, right? They're supposed to be that fiduciary. Oh, man. And that's, again, if you work in the banking industry, we're not hating on people, but there is some shady stuff that happens. No question. I'm going to share a little bit of some of the stuff that I uncovered, but I would say, I think for me, I would kind of go along with what Ryan said. We're going to get into that a little bit, but the other one for me was moving and telling myself I didn't really have that much stuff, right? When we moved, how much stuff we really had. That was probably, and again, because I do this for a living, so this last transaction that we just did like 18, 20 months ago I kind of already knew it was coming. But I would say the amount of stuff I had was probably the most surprising. I thought we were living minimalistic. Yeah, not so much. So step number one to really get yourself to a point where you're ready to buy ready to buy a home is really to look at your debt. So I would suggest, and again, we're here to make suggestions. We're not telling you that this has to be the way you do it. But based on my experience, I would just reduce as much of the debt as you can before you buy a house, especially things like, your high interest credit card debt, personal loans, payday loans, money you owe to friends and family. And the other thing you want to kind of look at too is, if you're getting on a budget, have a budget, you're looking at your total amount of debt that you have. If that is like stressing you out a little bit, like if you're looking at that and you don't have a house yet and you're kind of like, wow, this is a lot. I'm telling you, adding a home is only going to make it worse, right? But for some reason here in the United States, we glorify home buying, right? It's like this ultimate thing, and it can be a really good thing, but for a lot of people, it can also get them into a tougher situation. And when that happens, typically it's like, well, I haven't been managing my current finances, but they say it's smart that I should buy a home. Let's go buy a home and add all this stuff back onto it. And we want to talk about stress.
They don't just glorify the home buying process, though. They glorify the fact that renting is like a sin.
Correct.
Or not glorify, but like they make it sound so bad that you're not investing in anything and you're just throwing your money to the person who owns the place you're renting.
Right.
Yeah, it becomes a very like single leveled argument about like the key to financial wealth is to buy a home, right? And they don't want to dive deeper into that argument. It's just, that's the argument, and buying a home is the key to financial wealth. And then that's it. That's the end of it. It's like, wait, well, hang on. It's really not. Like, that's part of it. I'll agree with you, but it can also lead to financial ruin if you're not ready for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was actually looking on our podcast list because we did that. I'm trying to just find what episode it is. I'll have to see if I can get it before we end this. I thought I just saw. Oh, yeah, here it is. Is renting a waste of money and a sin? This is episode 60. So if you're listening to this, Amber just brought this up. I'm glad you brought it up. Go to episode 60 of our podcast list, and we talk all about renting and how that can kind of fit into your whole get out of debt journey. But anyway, so reduce as much debt as you possibly can. The next step is really to make sure that you have the ability to save, right? So having a large emergency fund at the point of when you're ready to buy a home is a really good thing to have. All right. I think this is probably one of the things that most people overlook. Most people probably skip it altogether. If you look at saving statistics and how much money, I mean, the majority of people can't even cover a $400 expense without having to borrow the money right now. We want to kind of stay away from that, right? So ideally speaking, before you buy a house, build yourself a large emergency fund.
100%. This saved us.
It's huge.
Oh my gosh, we've been here 2 years. next month, and we have dipped into our emergency fund more times. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
How many times we've dipped into it in the last 2 years.
Yep.
Because stuff just came up. And we would have had to go into debt had we not bought our house and had the emergency fund and had that plan.
Yeah, we just dealt with the same thing, and I think over the last 18 months, I would say our finances have had a really fun roller coaster since we bought this house. And I would agree. I think there was no question we would have been right back into debt had we had not had an emergency fund and a plan and a budget that we could work with when these things came up, and it's not just the house. It's like, oh, all of a sudden, the car needs $2,000 worth of repairs, needs new brakes, needs new tires, needs new rotors. Oh, that happened. Or, medical bill comes up, right? It's like, that's what we mentioned earlier. Like if the current state of your finances is stressing you out, adding the house on isn't going to help. Like it's going to add on even more of the stress. So having that emergency fund. And if you don't have it, like, again, we're not saying you can't buy a house, even though I would really stress to get this first, but at least have the ability to save, right? So when you're setting up your budget and when you're going through your expenses of, okay, this is what we think we can afford for a house, these are all of our bills, this is what we got to pay. Like, if you get to the end of that budget and there's no money to save, you're in a really bad spot. That's not a good place to be. You want to be able to at least have a good chunk of money every month that you're able to save, that you can either work with to cover unknown expenses that are coming up, or be able to put that money away into some sort of savings for your future, right? For future expenses that are going to come up. So emergency fund is just, it's like a big giant hug that you're going to need when you're a homeowner. There's no question. Obviously, the next one we kind of mentioned is just having a good monthly budget. So budgeting is going to make the home buying process a lot smoother and a lot less stressful, as it will the rest of your life. When you first get started with budgeting, though, we've got tons of episodes here on this podcast about budgeting. Make sure you go check them out. We talk, budgeting basics for beginners, how to get started. All of that stuff is here on this podcast. But if you don't have a monthly budget before you buy a house, like you got to have one of these things done. Knowing where your money's going, having control over where your money's going. So important. And as I mentioned, for us, having this budget has really been kind of like, it's like a really good teammate almost, like in the home ownership process of, okay, how are we going to plan for these upcoming expenses? How are we going to plan to still meet our financial goals? Like, the budget is the plan. That helps us keep it all together. All right, the next area you want to make sure you try to do is to budget and save up for a down payment. All right. Now, ideally speaking, you're going to want to shoot for 10 to 20% of whatever the total purchase price of the home is, right? So easy math, if you were going to buy a $100,000 house, 10 to 20 grand is what you'd want to save up for that house. All right. If it was a $200,000 house, 20 to 40 grand ideally is what you would want to save. All right. Now, the reason for that is because when you are able to save at least minimum of getting to the 20%, you avoid PMI insurance or private mortgage insurance. So anything less than 20%, the mortgage company is going to say, okay, we'll take this, but you have to carry a private mortgage insurance basically to ensure that the mortgage is paid, essentially, right? And that is going to be based on a certain percentage, so that could be, depending on the home value, it could be, 80, 90, $100. It could even be upwards of $250. It just kind of depends on the overall home value of the house that you're purchasing. All right. There are other programs out there, and we're going to talk about finding like a good lender, right? Someone that you can work with on this, but there are other first-time home buyer programs, and people might be like, well, Brad, what do you think about like FHA loans, 3.5% down? You can look at these. I think in this day and age, based on where we're at, just financially speaking, and where a lot of people are at, where the housing market's going, I would say, 10 years ago, I would say stay away from FHA loans. But now, 10 years where we're at now and seeing how housing prices have just skyrocketed, I mean, being able to save up 10 to 20% and being able to obviously keep pace with the way that houses are rising in price and being able to still meet that 10 to 20%, it's getting harder and harder all the time. I still think it's a good goal to shoot for, but FHA loans, 3.5% down payment programs, those first-time home buyer programs, you can definitely look into them. Just understand everything that you're getting into, right? How it works, how it's going to affect you long-term, interest rates. I mean, there's definitely some different requirements for FHA loans. So again, having a good lender, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, can help walk you through and teach you a lot of these things that you need to know about some of these programs. Very much like Ryan said, the only thing I'm going to tell you is that don't take everything that they say like they've scribed it into stone, right? And this is just the way it is. And you look to them as the experts. Like, you really want to find people, interview people, look for someone who's going to teach you, show you, and really explain everything to you so you make a good decision for you, not necessarily what's great for their pockets and making them money. All right, so you just want to make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into. Closing costs. Guys, this one always, I think, probably surprises a lot of people, is just the overall closing costs of the whole purchase, right? So things like earnest money. You know, when you put in an offer, you got to put in some earnest money, like, hey, this is a good faith offer. We're putting this money up forward, right? Home inspection. Like, if you get a home inspection done, you have to pay cash for that. When we got our home inspection done 18 months ago, I think we paid like $525 for our home inspection. If you get any sort of testing done, like I think it's, what is it, radon? I think it's radon that they do, radon testing, or any sort of mold testing or anything like that. Unless you negotiate it into the contract where the seller has to pay it, you as the buyer will likely have to pay to plan to pay a lot of those costs that go with that real estate transaction. Obviously, then you have your closing costs of your loan. So again, this is something that your lender will go through with you. They'll actually give you a loan estimate that they have to give you that kind of goes through and spells everything out, gives you all the numbers that you need to know, and everything will be right there, and you should be able to see exactly what it's going to cost you to close out those loans. But these are all things that you're going to want to plan for early, not like emotionally go out and put an offer on a house without doing some of this homework, and then all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, we need earnest money. Holy crap, we got to pay for a home inspection. Holy crap, we got to have closing costs, right? And like Amber, you mentioned, the stress can really come on very, very quickly if you're not prepared for some of this stuff.
And I was prepared for all of that. I was prepared for the closing costs, the lawyer's fees, and it was still very, very stressful.
Yeah. Even when you're prepared, right? It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. The other one is just budgeting in general, just looking at future expenses. This is one of the 5 daily financial to-dos that we teach our Roots members. Is number 5 is really just about looking ahead towards the future. So when you are a home buyer, what other expenses are you going to have? I can tell you one of the number one things that most people miss is that they have to keep up on the house, like the maintenance of it. Now, the recommended percentages that they say to budget for future improvements is like 1 to 3% of the total value of the home. All right. So, for instance,
per year.
Per year. Yep. Per year. So let's say you own a $200,000 house. On the high end, you're going to want to budget, set aside, be able to save and set aside $6,000 a year to be able to make improvements. Now, it may not happen that year. Maybe it happens the next year, right? But you're putting that money away to be able to pay for some of those home improvements. Now, this is why the home equity line of credit has gotten so popular, right? Because people don't do this. So what happens is that they bust into their home equity to pay for future repairs. Now, I get there are certain situations where you may need to have that happen. I get that life's not perfect. Not everything's going to work out perfectly. Like, for instance, if for some reason, we had all of a sudden major roof damage, where it was going to cost, 20, 30 grand to get our roof fixed. Like, it would be pretty tough for us to get that covered. Like, we'd have to probably take on debt, even being debt free, right? But you still have to do your due diligence to stay out of some of that stuff, right? So, things like fixing a sink. It's just the little things. We just finished up a little deck area. It's tiny. It's like a 5 foot by 10 foot little deck area where my grill sits on. It was like $100 just for the boards, right? It's just like all of those little things. Address numbers. We just bought address numbers. It was like $40 for address numbers, for metal address numbers. We didn't want the plastic ones because we didn't want them to last. $40. I was like, holy crap, right? So it's like all light switch covers, electric light switch covers. It's just like all of these little things, right? It's not always just these big giant things. It's all the little things, painting and just all of those things that you're going to want to think about as a homeowner that you are now going to be 100% responsible for. The other thing too is,
I think I think too, when you're buying a house, you have to look at the house you're buying, right? I mean, especially when it comes to this sort of thing. So we bought this house, almost 9 years ago. And if you look at this 1 to 3%, I mean, this is fairly accurate. I would say from 9 years ago, from when we bought it till now, we've probably spent close to $40,000 on repairs, upkeep, just it's not all like making it nicer and curtains and fanciness, like we replaced the heat and air this year. We've had to replace the water heater. We've had to do some other major plumbing things that were $1,000 here, $1,500 there. And so like, I would say over these 9 years, we had a patio door we had to have replaced. I'm not super handy. Maybe you've got someone in your family that knows how to do all that. I can't do it all myself. So like we had to put out a lot of money for all this stuff. And when we bought the house, we knew like, if you're buying an older home and the heat and air is 20 years old, you better plan to replace that, probably in the first 5 to 10 years you own that house.
Yep.
Or if you bought a house and the roof is 30 years old, you better plan to re-roof the house. And you better plan to budget for re-roofing the house. I think a lot of us, and when I bought my houses earlier in my life, it's like I was focused on the payment and like, I'm not going to have to do that. It'll last. I'll never have it'll be fine, and then when it's not fine, it's like, oh crap, what do we do? And it's like, break the charge card out and here we go.
Yeah. It's crazy. We just had someone over and we don't need them just yet, but we will when we probably get our roof done in the next 5-7 years. But we had someone come over and give us a quote for gutters. There's like those cool leaf guard gutters. This ones with the covers on the top.
Yep.
And so we have like a lot of big oak trees around our house. So we get a lot of leaves in the fall, which is going to start happening here anytime now. And they wanted list price. His first offer was 20 grand for gutters. 20 grand. I was like, what kind of gutters you got here? What are these? These plated in gold? And then finally, because he's a salesperson. I get it. So, we were going back and forth. He's talking to me. And then his last offer was 12 grand for gutters. So there you go. No, we didn't buy them. There's no way. I was like, still way in hell. I'm paying 12 grand for gutters. I was like, I'll go up in my roof and clean them out myself. I don't need the fancy covers. But seriously, it's stuff like that you don't think about. Like, oh, when your gutters aren't working, because again, rainwater going down your foundation, not a good thing, right? So you got to make sure that you're checking those things out. But nobody thinks about those kinds of things and the costs that go in with getting that stuff fixed. Like we put a fireplace liner in our fire. We have a wood burning fireplace, and it was like $3,800. $3,800 for a stainless steel wood burning liner, new chimney, everything done. We love it, but holy crap! When I bought the house, I never expected that it would be that expensive for a fireplace liner. So yeah, you just got to make sure you're doing your homework. This is why it's really good to get a home inspection done, and that way they kind of give you a kind of like a list of all the things. Like, hey, you're the things that are concerning about this house. Make sure you check out the prices of them and have a plan for those things. Next step for you is kind of once you get the foundation laid. All right, so you've got a budget, you're able to save, or you're building an emergency fund, you got some money set aside, you're paying off a good majority of your debt. The next step is really determining with that budget is what you can reasonably afford. And Ryan, you kind of hit on this as you talked about what surprised you most about the home buying process. But 25 to 28% of your gross income is the general rule. That's what they say is the guideline, right? Now they say gross income. Now my recommendation is to use take-home pay because that's what you actually bring home, right? So very much like Ryan said, your lender or your mortgage lender, they may throw out a number at you like, based on what you make and based on what your other debts are and based on where you're at, this is what you could afford. And it may come back as like, holy crap, that's a lot higher than we thought. But can you really afford the payment that they're saying that you can afford? Because at the end of the day, once the loan's signed, they can give a rip if you can afford it or not, right? You got to afford it. You got to figure it out. But make sure you look at what you can afford first. And I would highly recommend, and I don't know, you guys can give me your feelings on this, before you even start looking at a house. Because emotion plays a role in a lot of this too, right? So, I wouldn't suggest, hey, we're going to go buy a house. Let's call a realtor. Let's go out to these open houses and really let's not talk about the money side. Let's just go get ourselves falling in love with houses and then come to find out it's like, holy crap, we can't afford most of these things, right? So make sure you determine what you can afford, then go ahead and look and start looking at what are the houses that are going to be inside that budget.
Yeah, I think this for us too was one of the key things we learned when we bought this house is we really used our take home pay as the basis for what we could afford, and we stuck to that 25%. We wanted to be 25% or less because especially when you get into like FHA, I mean, depending on your situation, I mean, if you don't have a lot of debt, I mean, they'll potentially let you go as high as 40 to 50% of debt to income ratio, and the mortgage people aren't going to be shy of telling you that that's what you can do. They're not wrong. You could get allowed to have half your income wrapped up, but if it's half your gross income, that means you're potentially wrapping up maybe 60% of your take home income
right
in a house payment. And I think that that's what people get confused on a lot of time. When you're qualifying for a house, they're always using your gross. So if you're not saving for things like for retirement or doing all those things already, and then you go on a high debt to income ratio, you're going to have a really hard time saving for a retirement or paying for life insurance or doing all those necessary things that you're supposed to be doing. If you just buy so much house that you can't afford anything else.
Yeah. The other recommendation I would have as far as affordability is looking at, okay, if more than likely, if you don't own a home now, you're probably renting, right? So if you're renting now and your mortgage is higher than the potential mortgage that you're going to pay is higher than your current rent, I would recommend trying to pay the mortgage based on where you live now, right? So let's say, for instance, your rent is $1,200 a month, all right? But the mortgage that you're looking at trying to afford is like $1,800, all right? So what I would suggest, rather than trying to assume you can afford that, is just afford it. See if you can. So make your rent $1,800 and take the $600 difference and just put that into your savings account or your down payment fund to ensure that you actually can make that payment. And do it long enough to prove to yourself that, okay, we'll be able to handle this, right? And then adjust the rest of your budget, so you can see, how's this going to affect groceries? How is this going to affect going out to eat? How is this going to affect our lifestyle, right? Because, $600 difference, if that's what it is, or any difference in your budget, is going to change some things for you on a day-to-day life, right? So you want to make sure that you can handle some of those things. Now, we talked about working with a mortgage lender to discuss your loan options because there's a lot of different things out there. You got a 15-year mortgage. You can get 10-year mortgages. You can get 30-year mortgages. You can get, the FHA type things. There's so many different options that are out there. It's really important for you to find a lender that will teach you about them, not just tell you this is what you need, but really go through your stuff and show you, okay, based on where you're at, these are the things that you can look at. Now, again, remember, just because they say it does not mean it's the law or this is the way it is, right? Because, again, if there are things that in your gut you feel like, I just don't know if I want to do this, or it's a lot more than I thought it was going to be, just, listen to that, and talk to a few different lenders. Get other people's viewpoints and shop it around a little bit and find somebody that can really work with you on this. And it'll make the process that much better, especially if you have a good relationship with them and a trusting relationship with them as well. If you got a bad feeling about them, that's a good sign you got the wrong person, right? So as far as what loans to recommend, I will say, the most common one that's out there is obviously a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And I don't have anything against it except for the amount of interest that you're going to pay. If you compare the 30-year versus the 15, you're going to pay an immense amount more interest over those 15 extra years. Where there's a good argument on this, though, is, well, if I take out a 30-year fixed, instead of taking a 15, which would increase the loan amount, I'm going to take the 30, take the lower loan amount, and I'm going to cut the difference, and I'm going to invest the difference. In that case, you could have a good argument, right? That could work. I've seen that. Seen people talk about it. It's a good argument, right? Here's the downside of that argument. Most people don't do it. Right? They don't. It's like the same thing. Like, people take a 30-year mortgage out. They say, I'm going to pay extra, make that one extra payment every year, or I'm going to pay a little extra to pay it off in 20 years. If you look at statistics, most people don't do it, right? So again, this goes back to that. We all have good intentions, right? We're really good at selling ourselves that we will do it. but will you really do it, right? So when we got our mortgage, we went with a 15-year fixed rate mortgage. Yes, I understand that means that we are investing less in retirement, but at the same time, I also know my own behaviors, and I want a paid-for house by the time I retire. And I know that if I push it out to 30, I'm going to sell myself not to pay it off early, right? Because there's going to be a lot of other important things that are going to come up that I'm not going to pay it off. So 15-year, it holds my feet to the fire. I got to get it done, right? And we're still able to save and invest in retirement. And by the time we get there, we'll also have a paid-for house. So, but at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you. You just have to understand what it is that you're getting into it. Don't just do a 30-year fixed rate mortgage because the lender told you to. Really understand how and what you're getting into. How is this going to affect your future goals? What are you paying in the long run? It all fits into your overall financial plan.
And I think too, just, when you're meeting with lenders, and it goes back to knowing what you can afford, because 40-year mortgages are a thing now. Housing prices are crazy. And so if you go in to that lender, you really got to walk in knowing, like, having done your homework, here's what we can afford, here's what we want to pay, because they're going to throw options out. And if you walk in and you're like, I don't know what we can afford, you may be walking out with a 40-year mortgage on a house that you can't really afford, but you're stretching it to 40 years because, I love it. So you really got to know what you're doing before you walk in. And again, this is not a knock against mortgage lenders. They're there to sell mortgages.
Yep.
They're not there to help coach you and teach you all the financial things. Some of them are great and will do that. But most of them, like my son, he sells cars. He has people all the time asking like financial advice. How do I get out from upside down? He's like, I'm not like a financial coach when it comes to this. I sell cars. That's what he does.
Right.
But so you really need to know walking in what you can afford when you're going to see a lender.
Right. Here, I'll just put it this way. We have people who have been mortgage lenders and who do loans that come into our program to get out of debt. That's all we need to say. Right. So just because they do those jobs does not make them financial experts. So just be cautious. Just make sure you understand. Do your homework. Go through some of this stuff. It'll pay off in the end. And then last but not least is working with a good real estate agent. I believe this. Not a big fan of for sale by owner. I know that there's people out there who do it and who have success with it. But me personally, I am not a home expert. I don't watch the market real close. I'm not doing it every single day. Good agents would have your best interest in mind. So they're a fiduciary, meaning they're putting your financial interest in mind before theirs. They've got great market information about what's going on with the market, whether you're selling or you're buying. They've got great negotiation skills. So this is going to be especially important when you want to get referrals. Like, hey, is this person good? Because your realtor is representing you, right? Whether you're buying or selling. So make sure you got someone who's really good at negotiation. Make sure you got someone who's better than you at negotiation, because hopefully they're going to be able to get you a better deal. Things that you didn't think of, right? Things that are going to be able to save you money. Obviously have good experience, and find, again, an agent who's going to be able to teach you. And just, a lot of these companies now do these first-time home buyer programs where they've got classes and seminars that to take you through. And I think those things are all great. But again, I think the key to finding a good agent is finding someone that you can connect with, that understands your needs, that understands your financial goals, what you're looking for, why you need it, and they respect all of that. And I think that those things are super, super important. Guys, would there be anything else lastly that you would share? And again, I understand, like we told you guys, this is not an all-inclusive, but these are just the big things that you want to focus on if you're either buying your first home or you're getting ready to get into the home buying process or selling process. These are some of the things that you want to think about from a financial standpoint.
I think the biggest thing is just patience. Have patience with the whole process. That is just huge. Don't rush into anything because something might happen that's just not what you're expecting.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was so shocked. See, we bought our house right in the thick of all of and it's still kind of going on in some areas, but right in the thick of the home craziness back in 2021. And I remember talking to my realtor, and she's like, well, you guys should just be prepared if you want to buy a house now to bid over what asking is, probably like $20,000, $30,000, sometimes even $40,000 if you want to have a chance of getting a house. And I'm like, no. It's like, I don't need a house that bad. I'm not going to participate, right? And she's like, well, we'll still look, but she's like, just prepare for that. But there were people buying houses without home inspections. There were people just none of that. I was just like, it was just wild what happened to the housing market? It's just wild. So, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for people who did buy and maybe bought too much. And will that play a role now that the recession is here and, inflation is the way it is? Will it play a role in anything in the future in the next couple of years? I don't know. It'd be interesting.
And anybody who, we locked in at a really low interest rate.
Yeah.
So now in 3 more years, I mean, chances are it's up. It's not. I don't think it's going to start going down.
Right. Yeah, that was the only benefit for us too. We lucked out. We found a good house. Did not have to overbid. Needed some work, and I think that's one of the reasons why we found it. And we got a lower interest rate as well, so we were very, very fortunate. But man, it's just crazy what was going on. So, anyways, hope those tips helped you guys out. We're gonna take a quick commercial break and come back with some celebrations.
Hey, if you love planners, this is for you. But you know why planners frustrate me? Because they only really get it half right. Now, sure, they're really good and fancy about helping you manage your time, which is really important, obviously. That's what a planner's for. But where they get it wrong is money, the second most valuable resource in our lives. Most planners don't include any financial planning, things like, keeping track of paydays, bills, due dates, spending, yearly expenses, budgets, cash flow planning, debt elimination plans, and goal planning, right? None of that stuff. That's a real pain. And then what? Then you got to create your own in some silly binder, right? And who has time for all of that stuff? So instead, what happens? Nothing, right? A lot of people tend to ignore their finances even more, and things only get worse. Well, that all ends today because I am so excited to announce and release my brand new, totally awesome Debt Freedom Planner. This thing's awesome, by the way. Now, before you say, Brad, I've already got a planner. This is not an ordinary day planner. This is the Debt Freedom Planner, which is a companion tool that works with your day planner, and it's built to help you manage your money, pay off more debt, and melt away financial stress. And I believe this is the tool that a lot of people who want to take control of their finances have been waiting for. So head on over to therealdebtfreedad.com, click on the Debt Freedom Planner in the menu to get access to your planner today.
Hey, what's this I see? I thought this was a party! Let's
All right. That sound means it's time for the celebrations of the show. And today we are kicking it off with Heather Buka. Heather says, just getting started and I can finally finish reviewing the last 4 months of my bank statements and canceling all unnecessary subscriptions. I started my emergency fund envelope and put my first $50 in. That is awesome. She says, baby steps. Absolutely, Heather. Congratulations to you for getting started. Those are some great wins.
Max Wilder, I didn't eat out all week.
It's a big win. This is tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long have you guys gone, Amber, how long have you gone without going out to eat?
I think a month.
A month is the longest. Ryan, what about you? Have you guys ever done anything longer than that?
Couple hours. No, I've never done any challenge. I mean, literally, it's probably been in the days. It's not
Couple days here or there.
I just literally before we started this, I sent my wife a picture of the Mexican pizza's coming back. We got an email that says we got early access.
Oh, that's funny.
Thank you, Taco Bell.
That's funny. You get early access to it?
Yeah, like I don't know how, but yeah, I got an email or something that said like if you order through the app, you get early access to the Mexican pizza.
You maybe should be concerned that you get early access. Maybe you've ordered too many of them. All right. Sandy's next.
Sandy Kurtz Jarrett changed internet providers and I'm saving $80 a month.
Yeah, that's huge. $80. That's an awesome savings. Good for you. Brenda Philhauer paid off 2 small credit cards and she is getting back on track. 2 small credit cards paid off. Man, Brenda, that probably feels great. Thanks. Good for you.
Amberette, able to put $500 into savings after paying off a small credit card.
Awesome. Way to go, Ann.
Meredith Bellini, for the first time ever, started a sinking fund for my vacation in November.
Yeah, that is awesome, Meredith. Congratulations to you. Paying cash for that vacation. Awesome win. And congratulations to all you guys who are working your way to financial freedom. And remember, if you're just getting started with our podcast, or maybe you've been listening for some time and you're interested in how you can get started on the road to financial freedom, visit our website at balancesense.com and sign up for my free Life Without Payments workshop, where I'm going to show you the first steps that have helped tens of thousands of people just like you and I kick financial stress and worry for good. And thanks for hanging out with us here today. We love your feedback, and it also helps us grow our podcast. So please leave us an honest review. We read every single one of those. And as you guys know, the Debt Free Dad podcast is here to help you live a happier and stress-free financial life. So if you know someone who could benefit from our show, please give us a share. We appreciate you, and we will see you guys on an upcoming episode. Take care.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us here today. We love your feedback, and it also helps us grow our YouTube show. So please give us a like or leave us some honest feedback on this video. And if you want the latest from the show, obviously be sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe to our channel. And for the latest resources, or if you want more information on how to kick debt and financial stress, please be sure to check out the links in this video or head over to therealdebtfreedad.com. We'll see you guys on an upcoming show. Take care.